Hello and welcome to the 25th anniversary of the Fantasia International Film Festival. My name is Justine Smith, and I program the Fantasia Underground section. Tonight, it's my pleasure and privilege to be presenting the world premiere of Giving Birth to a Butterfly, a dreamy road movie that captures a deep sense of alienation and longing. It's a movie that honestly touched me profoundly, and ever since I saw it, I just can't get it out of my head. So first, I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us on this live stream. If you're in the Zoom chat, you can send questions at any point, and I'll get to as many as I can. Otherwise, I say let's introduce the cast and crew who are with us tonight. So if everyone would be kind enough to turn on their cameras, I'll be able to, oh yay, hi everyone. I'll start with the introductions. So first we have director Ted Schaefer. We have actors Annie Parisse and Paul Sparks. I have director of photography Matt Clegg, who is in his car, like he's a hustler, gotta love that. And co-writer Patrick Lawler. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Thank you. We're super excited to have
it. So what I'm going to just start with is kind of just a very general question. This is a world premiere, so people don't know very much about the movie, except they just watched it. I'm kind of curious how this kind of project got off the ground. As far as I understand, this is also your first feature.
Yeah. How did it get off the ground? Patrick and I have been working together for, I don't know, 9 years now. And we've been writing for a while, and I've been working with Matt Clegg for 10 years at least. And so this is a lot of labor of love, and I worked as a crew member for a very long time. And we felt like this was the script that was right to start with. So we called in a lot of favors and got a lot of help to make this little movie.
And in terms of the writing process, because this film on one hand is using a lot of familiar tropes, but I would argue is so unique, and so it feels so personal and original. Do you kind of want to talk about the development of the story and why it was something that you wanted to tell?
Sure, yeah. It is hard. Patrick, do you want to take this? I see you're chomping at the bit.
No, I'm not. No, yes. No, this was some of the themes that we were dealing with. I think Ted and I both really resonate with us real personally as well. Identity issues and issues of kind of, discovery, finding yourself, etc. But I don't know. I think initially this was something. The initial script also dealt with a lot of cultural kinds of issues, which is really represented in the Daryl character and the kind of the difficulties he's having with life and life changes, and also the kind of patriarchal kind of issues that he's also kind of manifesting, etc. So, but out of that, it became more of a kind of a personal sort of journey, I think, and that kind of really engaged us.
And so once you kind of have this script, I think kind of what brings everything together is you have this incredible cast and this incredible performances. How does the casting process work, and how do you kind of bring to life like this vision that you have on the page to the screen in terms of casting?
Casting is it's a very weird thing, but I think, the way we went about it was we just we knew like the kind of actors that we wanted, not just in terms of how they perform, but also just like the types of people they are. So like Annie and I just like met for coffee, and it was like pretty immediate where I was like, oh yeah, this like just makes perfect sense. So it was weirdly organic actually, because Gus's mom is also in the film, plays her mom, and Annie and Paul, and it like kind of fell into place, which just made sense with this kind of a movie that is small and personal, that you would end up with this kind of small and personal group of people that end up making it together.
And I guess since we have Annie and Paul here, do you want to kind of talk about what interested you in pursuing the project and kind of making this film happen too?
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually told Ted this when we met for coffee. I read the script and immediately started again and reread it because I feel like I honestly had never read anything quite like it before, and I was so intrigued by the turns that it took and where it ended up. And in a way, I thought like, gosh, I have to go back and revisit the beginning to see how we got there, because I just so didn't expect where it went. And so that was sort of like the first thing that really attracted me to it, was just like, oh my gosh, the uniqueness of it. And then I think also, I mean, Patrick just said it, like the sort of questions of identity and how we, like the journey to like knowing yourself. Again, not something that I see like explored a lot in the way that Ted and Patrick chose to explore it, and something that felt like just really exciting to me to jump into. So I was kind of like very taken with it right away.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It's like we read a lot of scripts, and for me, occasionally you read scripts and you can tell that the writers are really up to something. Like there's a density to like what they're writing, and also a kind of, I don't know, a sort of a uniqueness that is very apparent in this film. You know, you ask a lot of questions about it. And I think that for me, those are the kinds of projects that I like to be a part of, projects that they kind of ask a lot of you as like the actor, but also you feel like you're sort of unwinding it. It's good. And then also just, you know, I don't get an opportunity to work with Annie very often. And so for us, it was really nice. And it was such a loving relationship that we had in the show. And we could really like explore that side.
And I guess kind of Annie touched on this. Like, I know that when I didn't read the script, obviously, but when I watched the movie, I didn't like. I think the first 15 minutes, I'm like, I don't know what this is, but in such an exciting way, and because the tone is so unusual, and the kind of even just the blocking, like the way that people are kind of arranged in the space. I'm like, okay, I'm invested, but I don't know where this is going. And I think it's like there's a big risk being taken there. I would love if I guess in terms of like creating that the opening sequence and kind of those decisions that are made, if you could kind of explain like what you were trying to do or how you were trying to set the tone. I mean, this is in terms of image, this is in terms of writing, anything that kind of comes to mind, because to me, like that's what really hooked me.
Yeah, I mean, we talked extensively at every step about every decision that we were making, because I think part of it's like the way you set this type of tone is just like everything has to kind of work in unison. And yeah, so it was very, what are we trying to do there? I think it's like a balance, because the film ends up somewhere very different from where it begins, and it needs to feel like the shift is large but also understandable. And so we wanted the world that's created to feel familiar-ish but not fully natural. And so when the rug sort of gets pulled, it makes sense, or you were like at least subconsciously forewarned. You're sort of seeing it coming, and you're seeing how the construction of the world kind of builds, as opposed to just sort of dropping on you.
I know that like I'm one of the people who've described the film as kind of surreal, and I think that some people have like loaded expectations of what that may mean. My understanding of the term is always the most simple, which is it renders the familiar unfamiliar. And I think that that's kind of what you achieve in making this movie. You kind of create these familiar, you take this very familiar images and these familiar characters, and you render them unfamiliar in a way that allows for so much more openness, that I found just super powerful. I guess what I'm also kind of curious about in terms of like, you're working with a lot of actors who know each other or are literally related to each other or in relationships with each other, where there's a lot of rehearsal process, and how did it kind of work to bring everyone together on the same page?
Yeah, we did about a week of rehearsal before the film started, which I know I mean, I've worked for a while on indie films, and that seems like the thing that most people don't do. But we had it was nice because we had a week where we would meet in different combinations and kind of work through specific scenes, but also just like the general kind of character relationships, because I feel like the interrelationships between each characters was what was the most like important to kind of keep the consistency of. So what does, you know, the Gus and Annie combination look like? What is the Annie and Paul? So it like all kind of made sense, but also everybody was just pretty in it. I mean, it is hard when you're making a movie that isn't totally normal to find a bunch of people who are like game for it and get it. And nobody seemed to really struggle with it, which was really lucky, I think.
And I guess this question is for Matt, but also Ted. It's this decision to shoot on film and the kind of ways that you choose to shoot in film in terms of like this very like dreamy atmosphere. And I don't know the term for it, but when you have the kind of rounded edges around the frame, do you want to talk about that decision and kind of how you achieved the film's very, like I find, very dreamy, unique look?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you want to talk about it too? I mean, it was never really a question about shooting on film or not. It doesn't make sense to me for this type of movie to really. I couldn't imagine it digitally. Like it had to feel dreamy. It had to feel kind of magical, and I don't know how you pull it off. Not that you couldn't, but it didn't make sense in my head to shoot it any other way. And I mean, we talked a lot about light and how we could play with little sort of touches of light. So, you know, a lot of like what just happened on Matt's car, that sort of passing light. Like, how can we incorporate these sort of like little natural magical moments? Because I think the thing that was like, it like plays into that whole touching into the like exactly how you define surreal, making the normal scene abnormal.
Yeah, I would second the sort of like what you were saying about the characters being, you know, very familiar, but having I don't know, some elements to their character that it's like it was something about converting the mundanity to something sort of full of rapture, which I think is like at the center of this script, which is like takes place in suburbia with like a typical kind of like nuclear family and their you know, associates. You know, they're, you know, trying to convert their existence and elevate the poetry that exists in that. You know, something about the preciousness of film I think felt necessary as well. You know, it literally is a magic trick where you're you know, letting light into a tiny hole, and then you get, you know, beautiful images, you know, a few days later from this, you know, silver negative. You know, that type of preciousness when you're dealing with like, you know, a magic trick, especially, and it feels all the more important these days when, you know, the majority of independent film is shot on digital mediums. I think that was just kind of like the underline over, you know, throughout the whole process of like what we were trying to do, especially, you know, a little bit maybe insanely in such a small budget, but yeah. And then in terms of creating the dreamy effect, I think it was just kind of like plumbing the depths. You know, there's this kind of, the beauty exists in like all these corners of, you know, the world and America, and, you know, it's really, you know, it just was about just kind of trying to find these little places that converted the words that were on the page into real life, and got lucky with a few sort of mysterious houses and you know, beautiful back roads.
Yeah, that was actually what I wanted to know about. Is I feel like the location scouting on this film is so incredible. Like the locations are so beautiful and so like I just love them. So can you talk about finding these places, because they bring so much life to the movie?
Yeah, it's funny because part of that, I mean, that was a plumbing the depths of my childhood and finding we shot in a lot of houses from family friends and people I've known forever, and part of that, it wasn't really completely out of necessity. We could have rented places, but a lot of it was there were just places that made the most sense. I mean, the Nina's, I didn't like that house is a very strange house. I mean, there is a room. It's not actually a bedroom usually, but hidden behind a bookshelf. Like it just they built it and it's beautiful and it's strange and it just felt like it made the most sense. So a lot of it was like, but they're also, I mean, the film deals with a lot of stuff that I feel like comes from memory, and so it made sense to literally go into my memory to find these places that I've grown up around and utilize them.
And I feel like this is a very Canadian person question. When I watch the movie, it feels very American to me. And as though it's kind of grappling with an identity of what it means to be an American, or maybe someone who is from New York. I'm not like, to me, the specificity is harder to gauge. But it kind of reflects to me like a lot of the images and the iconography of Americana, even in terms of kind of characterization and very classical American stories. I was wondering, like, this is kind of a question for anybody, like, do you feel that this, especially the kind of tumultuous past decade or 2 decades or 3 decades we've had, as kind of a reflection of the American experience in any way? I feel like that's a very broad question. I'm like, as a Canadian, I'm not sure I could have answered if someone asked me the vice versa. So if you're like, I don't know, you can say that.
I mean, it has to be, right? Because I mean, I think it's funny when people that aren't American will sometimes even point out things that are uniquely American about that we might not even have totally noticed because we just take it for granted. But I mean, we were obviously working with certain tropes that are pretty American, or at least like cinematically American, like that like family unit and the pregnant teen, like that stuff is, I mean, it exists everywhere, but it like is so a lot of that stuff is really pervasive in American culture. And I think, yeah, I don't know that this, there's no way the film could have been made any other time just because it was made at this time. But I think, yeah, I don't know how much of it was like, how much of it is conscious and how much of it is unconscious is unclear to me, but I know that some of it is both.
Yeah, it is about the American dream in some ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the journey that's taken, trying to find out who you are, but also how that gets distorted in a variety of ways too. So, yeah, I think pretty American in some ways. But we could do that in Canada too, right?
I feel like, honestly, just to quickly add, like, there's something about the faceless corporation that wants to like steal every penny you have feels also uniquely American.
Sure.
And I always like, I love that sort of like, terrifying sense of a giant corporation, this mysterious money grubbing company that has a 1-800 number, that it's like a true piece of Americana in my book.
I totally agree, Matt. Like, I felt like one thing that was really exciting to me about it was sort of like the empathy attached to the like genuine belief of like Daryl, for example, or Diana, or actually every single character I feel like has a moment of like really truly dreaming and yet encountering like the power of, I mean, it's most clear with Diana, the power of like the massiveness of the system. and then also like, again, for me, like the hopefulness of like, going on the journey being convoluted. It doesn't take you where you think you want to go. And yet you do end up somewhere. And I feel like all of that, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I feel like I see it too, that the Americanness of it.
Yeah. It's the anxiety and the sort of tragedy of hope.
There's still hope. I mean, that's still something. Some people have
Right.
none. Something to hold on to. I actually have a question from one of the viewers. It's from Cassie or Casey. It's for Annie. I'm proud of Diana. Do you think she's happy now?
I'm what of Diana? Proud of
Proud.
Diana? I'm proud of her too. I think it was an incredible act of bravery on her part. And for me, one of the most exciting things about sort of playing her arc was that I don't think she could have made the decisions that she made by the end of the film at the beginning of the film. I mean, happy, I don't know. I hope so. I think she has a chance. I really think she has a chance.
That's beautiful.
I
think,
the
go ahead.
weirdest thing, but I just realized this, is that we refer to Ibsen's Ghost. I mean, that's being performed during the film, but it's probably Ibsen's Dollhouse, which is way more appropriate for Diana's character. Yeah.
I believe we talked about that.
We did. We talked about it. Yeah, but I never really saw it as so clearly connected as to the decision she actually makes. But yeah, we didn't want to make it too obvious, actually, right, Ted? We said we weren't going to do that. Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, I guess my other question then will be kind of what are the inspirations? I mean, like, I think that the Dollhouse reference makes a lot of sense. It can be cinematic, it can be other works of literature, art, whatever you feel kind of helped informed the film.
A lot of things for you, Kahlo.
Yeah.
Was it
Kahlo was a huge, yeah.
Magritte
with the train conductor. Yeah. Which I had forgotten about. Mina Loy, that's where the title comes from. That's the beginning of the film, and she's, this wonderful sort of presence. I was doing a presentation on her when we first came up with the film, and so she was in the back of my mind a lot of this.
Yeah, Isabel Allende, I remember we talked about a lot because I think I just happened to be reading House of the Spirits when we were writing it, and that helped, I think. And then when we were making it, I mean, we talked a lot, Matt and I talked a lot about Edward Yang, because he's just, I mean, the way especially, like the way he captures that sort of like family life and the tension of like, the tension of hope is like really so incredible. And he had such a way of like incorporating these surreal twists, and I mean, totally very different movies, but I think the way those, I remember we watched with our gaffer his first film at Metrograph. Yeah, that was a big one. Paris, Texas, because we're talking about road movies and that sort of thing. Matt, did you have?
Oh no, I was just shout out Metrograph, great cinema house, NYC. Shout out Edward Yang, true poet of cinema. No, I think you guys kind of covered it. I mean, Aki Kaurismäki obviously is like kind of a bit on the other side tonally, but I think important one. Any of the filmmakers that managed to create their own sort of, completely unique language that's just so rapturous and strange, but you don't know why. I mean, we humbly make this offering in an attempt to follow that canon, but yeah, there's a lot of incredible cinema heads out there.
So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions. So for anyone who's watching who wants to ask, this is your last opportunity. I will get through everything, so just shout out. Oh, I actually got a question right away, so thank you. So I have a question from Nicola, many films dealing with question of identity in relation to the American dream center on male protagonists. What made you choose to focus on the women in this story?
They're always the more interesting character. That's one thing.
Yeah, and it's a movie about birth and life, and we talked a lot about how it's a movie about prescribed roles, and so in that sense, yeah, the female character is generally the more interesting, especially when you're thinking about the American archetypes. So it made the most sense.
And I guess for me, one question I have that's kind of like a connection of I can't talk. I continued from that one is this idea of motherhood and kind of the complexities of that, because I feel like you avoid so many of the cliches and so many of the easy way outs, which I guess you do in a lot of different ways. But I would be really interested to kind of hear what anyone has to say about like the film's view on being a mother.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we've talked a lot about because it's incredibly complex, and it's dealt with in a number of different ways, obviously throughout the film, because you have three sets of mothers and three sets of mothers and two kids. But yeah, I think that I think that's part of it too, is that because motherhood is something that is kind of perceived in most films in a really kind of narrow view, that was something that was very interesting to us, because this is a film about birth and rebirth, and viewing how you relate to yourself through your kids, or, you know, as not just a mirror, but also as like an offspring, you know.
I really appreciate it. I'll just say, like, as a female who is a mother, I also don't often read like as complex and as empathetic a viewing of motherhood, and I found it really exciting to work on because it is complex. It's not at all simple, and as it relates to issues of identity or dreaming or ambition, obviously it's so layered, and I think there are as many approaches to it as there are mothers and children in the world. And like, I appreciated it being viewed through so many lenses in the same film, and always with like just like compassion and, like I said, like surprise. Like I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Amazing. Like, you know, so I appreciated it, and it was a pleasure to be a part of that kind of a story.
I mean, I guess I'm also kind of curious, why do you think there are so few nuanced or interesting like views of women who are and mothers in culture, since I guess like everyone has a mother, like that's like a certainty, even if
I'll just jump in and say, I just think it's such a scary topic, right? Like no one wants to say anything bad about mothering. And on the other hand, if they are going to say something bad, I think then it's like, just go whole hog. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's because it's really hard to talk with both clarity and complexity about something that is, you know, so both universal and also totally unique, you know, to every person's experience. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of like Ordinary People is one that I think that's a really incredible, interesting view of a mother. But even that, like, I think the way a lot of people read that is a pretty negative view of how Mary Tyler Moore plays that part, which I think it's like so beautiful and so complicated, and like it is. I think it's hard because people don't necessarily want to see the complexity in it. Maybe because we all have mothers, and probably all have issues with our mothers in different ways that kind of complicate how we can like view that relationship.
So I have another question from the viewers. This one is, a deer can symbolize many things: purity, gentleness, as well as power. And deer imagery came up a lot. What was the significance of the three-legged deer?
We're just laughing because we talked about this and how we would kind of deal with this, because it's such a a tricky thing with certain elements of the film, because it's like there's not a clear, simple answer, I think, intentionally. And like, I think if we talked too much about where it came from for us, it kind of flattens out the ability to view, because I think that image in particular is obviously prevalent and it's important for Diana, and I think for a lot of reasons, and it's hard to answer that satisfactorily.
Yeah, one of the things I had kind of thought about saying was that every story starts with 1,000 stories behind it, and there are all different kinds of cultural references to a deer, certainly spiritual connections, etc. But all of them kind of feed into it, but we never reduced it to one sort of idea. And the fact that it's a white deer has a whole other sort of connotations related to it too, because of the whiteness and the three-leggedness too. So I think of an incredibly prismatic item, object that we focused on. And the fact that it gets transferred as a gift twice in the film, I think is very important too. So, but I don't know exactly and what that means. So, just that it's very rich.
I mean, sometimes these things are just intuitive, right? It's like, even in your own dreams, it's not like A equals this, right? It's like,
Yes.
it's something that makes sense on another level that maybe defies easy explanation, but that doesn't mean it kind of, to me, that I find that richer, because it's like everyone can kind of bring whatever they need to make it work. And I think undeniably it works very well in this film. So I guess we're kind of rounding out for the night. And what I'm kind of curious about is what anyone's future projects are, if they want to share anything. Obviously, this movie is right at the beginning of its journey, and I'm very excited for it to play everywhere and for you guys to get to see it all together in a cinema. Like, that's going to be super fun. So if you have anything else you want to share about projects, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that this will have a nice long life, and Patrick and I have 6 scripts. I mean, we've been writing. We haven't stopped writing, and I think we have an idea of what we want to do next. I don't know how much I could say about it, but that we're starting to kind of get the ball rolling on that. And yeah,
it's exciting. and every project that we have, we try to rewrite the genre in some ways. We always try to explore different options and different avenues. So it's fun. It's great working with Ted. I love working with Ted. And Matt is outstanding, and the actors that we had on this film were amazing, especially Annie and Paul, just amazing. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there are some of the best things that Paul said were on the cutting room floor too, because because he took that character to a whole other level. I mean, a scary level.
I apologize. Yeah. Oh, Daryl. Sometimes you just pull the cork out, and the person that you really need to be just
double
finds its way to the surface. Yeah. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah. Well, Annie almost makes me cry when I see her perform. It's so beautiful. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really an incredible performance. And so thank you guys so much for being here. This has been an incredible experience, and I really hope that all of you get a chance to come to Fantasia one day, hopefully sooner rather than later. I know that you'll be welcomed with open arms. And for everyone who's watching right now, obviously this is the world premiere of a movie. If you liked it, please share, let people know the film is playing again. I believe I'd have to double check, but in 2 days. I'm sorry, I should have written that down.
Wednesday,
Yeah, Wednesday, because today is Monday. It's an important fact. And it'll be available for 24 hours. So tell your friends to go check it out. When it plays at other festivals, hype it up. If you're a critic, review it. Like, every little thing counts. I personally think this movie is so special. I want as many people as possible to watch it. And I can only do so much. So do your work too. Thank you guys. Honestly amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.